I think the best thing about a talk after lunch is most of the people are not interested, sleeping, thankfully. Damn it. So my name is Supreet, etc., etc. And I'm an Evox student.
So how do you pronounce it?
It's Supreet Pal Singh. Actually, I found a place over here which has Pizza Pal.
Just for you.
Or is it PayPal? Oh, it's not Pal, it's Pal. So I'm an Evox student working with the Nouveau team. So the content, am I loud enough at the back? At the back. So the contents of this presentation will be the project I worked on and my Evox experience and suggestions. So the name of my project, implementing a software scripting engine on Fermi architecture-based NVIDIA GPUs to achieve safe memory reclocking. Now what does this mean? Okay, firstly, how did I get to this? I started off as a web developer. Oh, I'm basically a student, an undergraduate of IT engineering. So I started off as a web developer, then I started contributing to KDE, and before this I had no clue about X development. I knew about X development, but I didn't think I could do it. And in the beginning I was constantly pinging my mentor, do you think I can do this? Do you think I can do this? Is it possible for me to do this? He's like, yeah, don't worry. It's all easy. It wasn't. So how did I come to apply for this? At the beginning of the summer, I was trying for some on-site internships. I wasn't basically interested in working at home and contributing to open source project because I was already on the, contributing to KDE, so I wanted to do something on-site. So I applied to the big shots. I was like, why not? Mozilla, Google, and Apple. The farthest I think I got was with the Firefox team. I got through till the third round of interviews, but Skype interviews are a mess. So after I was done applying everywhere and rejected, the GSOC deadline had passed, and I was left with two options, Android app development and Nouveau. I wasn't really sure about Nouveau because I'm like, oh, I don't understand the shit. So, but I was interested in doing it because I tend to get bored, or I try to learn more stuff while I'm studying. So since I started with web development, I shifted to KDE, and I wanted to try something new. But I was mostly familiar with Android app development. It didn't seem all that interesting, but it seemed easy. And I had no clue about Nouveau. So how did I get to this specific project? I only had ATI cards before this, and I'm a gamer, so I did have GPUs. I went on to buy my first NVIDIA card, so I wanted to work on it. And I asked if there was something new or happening in the latest versions of the NVIDIA chipsets, the Fermi and the Kepler. So Martin is like, yep, I'm working on Fermi memory reclocking. I'm like, awesome. In my head, I'm going, by the end of this, I'll be achieving memory reclocking. Soon enough, I knew that wasn't going to happen. So what was the problem with Fermi? In the beginning, the up till NV50, if I'm not wrong, the laptops did not require, the GPUs did not require a lot of reclocking because the default clock speeds were high enough for a good enough performance. But in the NV50, they introduced laptops could reclock the memory and the engines by themselves. What this did was save power, and the default clock speed was an intermediate, or I would say medium. In the NVA3, they introduced load-based reclocking. This certainly introduced more power efficiency, but this also introduced default clock speeds to 1/3 and a half of the maximum clock speeds which they were able to achieve. And I'm sort of new to this. I could be wrong at many places, so you could definitely tell me where I'm going wrong. So what this led to was a very low performance on Nouveau. And the performance got worse on Fermi. The default clock speed was like 10%, miserable performance. I have a Fermi card, so I can tell you that the performance was very low. So we went on with the process of reclocking. And Martin said we would like to do this the NV50 style, which was put the card off the bus, wait and write MMIO registers. Sound simple enough? Everything sounded so simple. So the main issue we face right now was the NV50 used the hardware sequencer, used the hardware sequencer to reclock, and the hardware sequencer was removed on the Fermi, replaced by a PDaemon. PDaemon is a microcontroller which has full access to the registers, capable of interrupt requests used for hardware monitoring and reclocking. It is based on the flexible microcode, ISA. It is a very general purpose, yeah. So Martin was already working on the open source implementation of PDaemon. The work done was he had already achieved host to PDaemon communication, fan management, and it worked on NVA 3 to NVA D9. And yeah. So it should work on Kepler. Have you tried it? Yeah, I haven't tried it. He has. So what was left was the work for me to implement PDaemon to host communication and a replacement for the hardware sequencer. And personally, I'm a big promoter of documentation, so I'm like, I'm going to write some documentation. Because, well, we need documentation. And it's not like we need documentation as a whole, because the people who are already working on it mostly understand lots of stuff. We need documentation for beginners, because if you need more new developers, you need some big documentation on how to get started with stuff. Not like buzzing the mentor every 2 minutes. Hey, what's this, what's that, tell me this. So I'll like to talk about the PDaemon to host communication. It was simple now that I think of it, but it wasn't simple when I was doing it. So I chose to implement the ring buffer. It was a basic ring buffer which used the get and put pointer. The put pointer writes, the get pointer reads. And it employed 4 parameters: the process ID, the message ID, the payload size, and the payload pointer. So basically, if a process has to use it, it has to send its process ID, the ID of the message it's sending, how big the message is, and where the message is located in the memory. And there were some basic checks which I introduced, like stop writing if the buffer is not read, stop reading if the buffer is empty, do not read if writing is not complete, write if reading is, do not write, okay, wait, write if reading is not complete. Yeah, doesn't make sense. Do not write if reading is not complete. Oh, yes, wait. Do not write if the reading of the next block section is not complete. Yeah. And the wrap around the ring buffer. So the status of PDaemon to host is it's tested and merged and it's working properly. Woohoo. And the next more difficult part was, but basically even this was not difficult. The difficulty was I had no clue about what to do, how to do this, and I was totally new to Nouveau development. So the main thing was getting to know how things work, what I need to do, and how I need to do this.
And you needed to write this in NVIDIA assembly. So yeah, I mean that was one of the challenges.
So I think when I started with this, I thought we had enough fucks in our documentation, but I got to know the Fermi flexible microcode is also known as fuck. Well, I chose to call it as FUC, but I don't know how you call it. F microcode?
That's what he said when we found this. I was like, what's that? Oh, fuck.
So then I had to introduce a hardware sequencer replacement, also known as the Fermi scripting engine. which should help us and be capable of memory reclocking. So the implementation process consisted of 3 steps: understanding hardware sequencer, designing the ISA, and implementing it in FUC. So the design of the ISA, I tried to do this, but I wasn't able to do this. And so Martin did the design of it, and he shortlisted the 6 basic things or functions which it needed to do: a full range delay, a short range delay, MIMO write, mask, wait, and hook it up with the PDEMON to host message, which I had implemented earlier. So the delay implementation had 2 parts, the full range and the short range. The short range took 2 params, a 16-bit nanosecond delay and a 16-bit microsecond delay. The full range was a 32-bit nanosecond delay. 64. A 64-bit nanosecond delay. The write takes 2 writes. This was a 32-bit. An 8-bit write and a 32-bit write. And the mask and wait are fairly simple. The mask and wait. The send message, hooking up with the send message has proved a little pain because it is still in testing, and I am coming up with new bugs now and then, and it refuses to work. But in the design, it takes 2 parameters, the size and the message. But we also need to have another parameter, which I have told you about, the message ID. So because the PDEMON to host takes 4 parameters: the process ID, the message ID, the size, and the pointer to the payload. So the process ID is static since it's coming from FSE, but we do not have the message ID. Yeah. So I had planned a demo for the XDC, but there was an unexpected hurdle. I was trying to do unaligned memory access. So I had to implement the 3 functions, the LD32, LD16, LD8, which basically introduce 8-bit loads, 32-bit loads, and 16-bit loads. And they worked, thankfully. So the current status is most of it is tested and working. The send message needs to support the message ID. And the send message needs more testing because it does not work the way it's supposed to work. And I went back to testing the PDEMON to host again. By send message, I refer to the PDEMON to host communication. And it's working correctly, but it does not work when I hook it up with the FSC. And what did I do with the documentation section? I wrote a blog post introducing Nouveau basics, and my entire EVOC documentation is on the blog. So if you are interested in reading how I went to this and what I've done, you can read my blog. And the highest achievement, I think the best thing I could do was talk to MWK, Marcin. So I sort of forced him into writing an intro.txt, which you can find on the NV tools. The basic problem I faced was the documentation was not missing when I got to know about things. The documentation, I think, was lacking when I started with it. We need more documentation for newbies. I have also, last year I was a part of the team which wrote the Beginner's Guide to KDE Development, which is with Matt, and I think he's taking it out right now. So if you want to have a look at it, you can. Well, there it is. So, and I do not know what's the progress on the book sprint, and if we are writing it for the newbies.
There is a introduction to X development. I don't know how much it would have helped you. It's about X development. Maybe it would have helped some.
Okay.
We have a 0th order draft ready right now. It should go up today or tomorrow. I've been saying that for a couple days. But yeah, sometime in the next few days it should be up for review. But it's going to be another month or 2 hard work before it's ready to give to people who are not those.
So I think the basic problem with almost all open source projects is that you need documentation for newbies. But what we get to know is we write documentation for developers who are already working on it. So if they want to work on what you are working on, they have documentation. But if someone wants to begin with it, they just need to ping the mentor. And what I've got to know that you need to be shameless about it, which I was. So, wrap up. The PDM12 host was a success. FSC should be done within the next few weeks. Hope if I do not come across some unexpected hurdles again. Documentation, I worked on the intro.txt, and it's an amazing doc. You need to go through it. The schematics that he has made from sheer text, I could probably not make it by hand. And now about the evoc. I don't know if many of you know about the program, but you know about the program now that Martin has told you about it. It is the endless vacation of code. You need to propose a project, a minimum 13-week or 3-month project, and then you get paid for it. It's like a paid internship over the summer. This is the current breakup. You get $1,000 upfront, which wasn't upfront. And then you get $2,000 at midterm, and then you get $2,000 at completion. So even though they were delayed, I did get them. So, and the best part about it is it can start anytime. Evoc suggestions, flexibility equal to good. Because we do not have summer everywhere, and it's not necessary that every student will be available at the same time of the year everywhere around the globe. And we need more specific rules, which does not equal to refer to GSOC. Because if we are having our own separate program, we need to have some separate rules. And since it's flexible, we need to have some flexible rules and specific rules. It should not be like that we need to refer to how Google is doing it. Definitely they're doing a much better job right now. But I feel if we are running an independent program, we should be more specific about what we are doing. And I feel the selection should completely be on the mentor rather than anything else. If the mentor says the student is fine, he should get selected. Because basically, the mentor is the one who's going to spend all his time. And it should be that you know the mentor. But it should not be like you need to know the student. Because if a student is coordinating with the mentor very well, and the mentor thinks that he is capable of doing everything, he should be up for the task.
I can pretty much promise you that any time the board's giving out money in $5,000 chunks, they're going to want some say in who they're giving it to. And I don't think that's crazy unreasonable. I mean, certainly we've tried really hard to defer to the mentors, and to use our judgment of them and who they were. But
Yep.
Ultimately, that's going to be part of the process. It's some kind of work.
Okay. And we should have some prerequisites on the wiki. For every project ID on the wiki, there should be something listed what you need to do to get this done. Because currently what the status is that you have the project ID on the wiki and the name of the mentor whom to contact. Which is fine, but if someone new is trying to apply for it, he needs to know what he needs to know to get the project done. And there should be some open mentors listed on the wiki. Suppose I need to work on Nouveau, and I have my own project idea in mind. Whom should I contact? So there's nothing like this on the wiki.
Just
IRC who? Like, I need to ping someone, or you just feel I should.
Like, I want to do that. Is someone willing to be my mentor?
It's kind of a rough bootstrapping problem.
So one of the things that we maybe want to think about working on as a community is that if you look at somebody like the Linux kernel, there are these many sort of semi-official roles that are documented in the documentation. At this point, this subsystem is being maintained by this person, or at this point, this chunk of stuff is being done by this person. I think this is true for X as well, except for the part where we actually write any of it down. We have a maintainers file, right?
50% correct.
Yeah, it's about 50% correct, and it's not necessarily easy to read what it means, I think. Yeah, that's an area where we could use some improvement. But I think the other thing that was said is right, too. I mean, one of the things that's going to get us excited about sponsoring a student is if they turn up on IRC or on the Xorg Devel email list and say, hey, I'm interested in doing this thing. That's just basic common sense, I think. But yes, we could put that line of common sense on the wiki. If you think you want to do an evoc project, maybe you should contact some of the X developers. Sure.
So yeah. And I think like KDE runs a season of KDE, which is similar to GSOC, but you don't get any pay for it. I think we should have a non-paid evoc for the X.
We do. You can absolutely, it's the same evoc. You can absolutely apply for it without requesting pay, and that is open to people who are not students. So if somebody wants to do an evoc-like experience who's not currently a student, we will absolutely approve that. If there's a mentor, you just don't pay.
No, the basic difference is.
Yeah, we do. It's actually on the evoc. We get it.
But what's the point about asking you guys more to do the project? I mean,
So the question was why is the board even involved? Well, the board is involved because, you know, we want to do basic sanity checks on giving out these $5,000, right? I mean, yeah, for students. Oh, for the rest of us? Well, yeah. I mean, we don't need to be involved in that, really. I mean, that's fine. It's never come up because no one has ever gotten as far as actually wanting to do an evoc project so far. I mean, really? There's one now? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so our first one's coming now. We can fine-tune this process. I think it's easy for us. I think it's easy for us to say yes to those kinds of requests. I mean, we might want to advise the mentor if we see a problem because we have some experience with this. But I mean, mostly, yeah, sure. I mean, I think that the policy reasons why the board is not willing to pay anyone who's not a student, we've talked about before. I'm happy to talk more about them if anybody's unclear on the concept. But obviously, we're excited to match mentors with people, you know, for any value of people. And yeah, I don't think the board would ever say no to that unless there was some really, really freakish thing that it's hard for me to even imagine. Yeah, it's possible that there would be some IP thing. It's possible that there would be some past history with a person, I guess, that would make us not want to associate our name with their work. But but mostly, yeah, we're just going to say yes to those.
I think since most of you are not familiar with the season of KDE, I was talking about students, and the main difference is you do not have any specific proposal, you do not have any specific deadlines, and since you're not getting paid, it's basically like you want to contribute to a project, you write an email, but it's for very, very newbies who are basically new to open source. So it's like someone who's helping you get into open source via X development. Now, I don't know if that's possible, but but I certainly have some use case scenarios in mind, like if there are some electronic students who are working on embedded systems outside of the open source world, and they want to get into open source, and so probably I won't lead them to KDE or web development. I would probably recommend them to X development. So it's basically a program which helps you get into open source rather than just X development. But once you're done with the non-paid evoc, you can probably apply for the paid one. So this would not only help you get students who are already ready to actually complete an evoc, but also be sort of relaxed that, yeah, he's not going to go anywhere. So, and yeah. So I have my thoughts on proposition by Martin. The first one wasn't really proposed by Martin. This was proposed by the board, that a patch requirement should be compulsory. Now, a patch requirement compulsory, I talked to Matt and he's like, a patch requirement anywhere in the open source world, or just, but I think it's not possible you put a requirement to propose a patch to Xorg and
So the patch requirement, the purpose of that is to show that the student is serious about it. They're not going to come up and say, oh, I got all this great idea. They come up with a proposal, and then they get their first check, and poof, they're out of there when you hear from them again. A patch says, okay, I've actually done some work up front to show, hey, I'm actually serious about contributing to a project. That gives the board a little more reassurance that, okay, one, you've invested the time that you kind of understand what's involved. You know how the tools work, you know how the process works, the people you are going to end up working and being involved with. And two, that you've taken it seriously enough to put the effort in to do all of that. So it kind of gives us some reassurance.
So basically a patch anywhere in the open source world.
I think we kind of just said it, yeah, because it shows that,
Yeah.
it shows the intent.
That's fine.
Anybody else, feel free to speak up or correct me. Or
I mean, not to belabor it, but I mean, this program is very much in flux. You know, we've talked about patch requirements, we've talked about pre-testing, we've talked about raising or lowering or eliminating the initial payment. All of these things have been on the table and will probably continue to be on the table over the next year or two as we figure out how this program works. One thing to keep in mind is that you are one of the first 6 students, we believe, because our records are terrible, through this program, and almost all of them have been in the last year. So, I mean, you know, we're figuring out how it works, and you know, the patch requirement, making the patch requirement compulsory might or might not be something we do, but we certainly are sensitive to the idea that we don't want to push people away because they don't feel like they can get started until they've gotten started.
Or maybe you could put a patch requirement compulsory / they work for the unpaid evoc company, something like that. And then he proposed that limit a student to 2 evocs. It totally depends what your purpose for running evoc is. Is it to get work done or get new developers involved, or where does the balance lie?
The second thing, more than the first thing, I think, has been the consensus of the board. But, I mean, obviously it has both purposes, but realistically, if we want to get work done, right, I mean, we would ask the mentors to just do this work, right? It would get done faster and it would be less work for them. What we don't want to see is this becoming some student's day job. You know, I was in school for 15 years. You know, I could have made a pretty good living knocking down evocs in that time. So
Because I've seen students who do GSOC every summer throughout their academics, like every summer. So it's sort of
one of Google's big differences with us is that
Google has been very, with its sub-projects, it's let them make the decisions. There are organizations participating in Summer of Code who choose to only let a student participate once. There are other organizations who are happy to have them participate every summer. And I think that's why we're looking at something somewhere in the middle. But you know, the organizations that have allowed people to participate in an arbitrary number of times tend to be organizations that are looking to get work done. You know, and the projects tend to be very prescribed projects that are, you know, very just set pieces of work that get done. It looks a lot more like a day job than something like X.org is ever going to have, where, as you found out, you know, you discover things, you do research, you end up with a project a lot of times that's completely different than the project you thought you were doing. That's a great experience to get people involved. After that, we really hope people, you know, or at least after a couple of times, we really hope that people are engaged enough they'll continue to contribute to X on their own. If they can't, well, we feel like we've failed with that student, and I think, or at least I feel like personally, not maybe I can't speak for the rest of the board, that we failed with that student and we're ready to give up.
So this sort of removes the purpose of evoc being a summer job for developers who are already involved in.
We don't have Google's resources, right? We can't afford to just fund a whole bunch of
Just keep it.
Yeah, we don't have Google's resources. We can't afford to be a permanent employment agency for, you know, a huge community. That's not something we can do, whereas they can if they choose to.
So limit a student to 1 evoc per year. I think that question is answered. Upfront payment low. Yes, definitely. And it should be upfront.
Yeah, we're obviously it hasn't been the policy of the board to promise an upfront payment and then not pay. But yeah, we're getting our, thank you, Stuart, we're getting our finances together much better, and we should do better with that.
And I think the basic motive of this presentation was getting EWOC in line rather than talking more about my project, because the main purpose of EWOC, I think, is to get new contributors into Nouveau and in general. So, and I put up some basic thoughts. And 3-month engagement before the project, which was proposed by Martin, no. I think it should be up to the mentor to check if the student is capable enough. And there should not be a restriction on 3-month engagement. Maybe someone can do a lot of work in 1 month and show that, yes, he's interested. So 3 months, I think, is definitely a very long time. Maybe you can come up with 1 month engagement. So I don't know how you want to do this. And there should be something for the mentors. Because if you need more mentors to be interested, there should be some sort of, you know, something to lure them in. Because this is a very tough job. Personally, I feel if a student is constantly buzzing you all the time, which I was, I think it's a really tough job for the mentor. 3 months of constant teaching over the IRC, which for teaching, I do not think is the best medium. So, and I don't know what happens in GSOC. Maybe Martin can, if there's something for the mentors in GSOC.
Right, the mentoring organization in GSOC, to answer the question, receives a small payment per student, attempted. We weren't clear how to pay ourselves a small payment, so we gave up on that part. I'm not opposed in principle to mentor payments, but except for we've had a hard and fast rule in the board for the last while, for good reasons, I think, that other than a weird exception for students because they're students, we try not to pay anybody for any work related to X.org. The board itself is an all-volunteer organization.
Maybe not payments, but I don't know, something else.
Yeah, you know, if you know, for example, yeah, the T-shirt seems to be a big deal for reasons I don't understand in GSOC.
We need T-shirts for XDC.
Yeah, and I, you know, if the mentors and students came to me and said, yeah, we need to do T-shirts for XDC, which I hear you saying, yeah, we could do that. It's not easy or difficult or expensive. I'm not sure any mentors would really care. Most of us have bins and bins of T-shirts at home. But yeah. You know, sure.
There are never enough T-shirts.
Yeah, so that I have been Google Summer of Code mentor a few years now. I don't care about this T-shirt at all. If I think about how much time I have to invest into this Google Summer of Code project, it's worth something a few €1,000 or something like that. So that really doesn't matter, especially as I have a complete bin of T-shirts. And if I would want another geek T-shirt, I think there are still some open source OpenSUSE T-shirts left. So yeah, I really don't think it makes much sense to give anything to the mentors because they don't do it for anything except that they want to get new people in.
I do it for a T-shirt. Okay, was this the closing comment? Because we are a little bit over time, but I think that's...
And
okay.
we need to publicize this. Because personally, I feel KDE is very big in India because of GSOC. And we have shitloads of people coming.
So this year, KDE had, I think, 60 or 61 Google Summer of Code project, and only one project failed. So basically, we have a shitload of people working on it, and that's... Well, we are a huge organization, and we have many mentors who are really involved in getting that done, and it's a lot of work.
So one thing we did when we set up EVOC was to model it in some ways after the Google Summer of Code. As somebody who's been a Google Summer of Code organization lead for two different organizations since Google Summer of Code started, I think it's really dangerous in a lot of ways to generalize that experience. Let me point out that for X.org, we've been in GSOC every year until this one since year 2, and we have never seen 50 or 60 developers, I think. And I don't think it's because we failed. What? KDE is the largest. Yeah, KDE is the largest organization. Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with where EVOC is right now. I think there's I think a bunch of the suggestions you've made are very valid to consider and think about. It's tricky, and you know, we really appreciate anybody's thoughts and ideas and help. And if anybody at any time has feedback for the board on EVOC or anything else, please just tell us. We would love to hear it.
My basic motive was that you need to publicize this more. The only way I got to know about this was someone at KDE wrote a blog post about it. So you need to publicize this more. That's the basic, so you get more applications and you can expand the program. This not only helps XORG development become more widely known, but people would get to know that this can be done.
Well, do it. I mean, you know the KDE community, just write blog posts.
I have written a lot of blog posts. Maybe you should write one. So here are the links if you are interested in. The PDemon has been hosted by Martin at Gitorius. This is my blog, supreetpal@blogspot.com. My IRC nick, very simple, Supreet, and my email ID if you want to contact me. So I think I'll go back to the first, if I've completed everything. Yep. So are there any questions? But mostly I'd like to have some suggestions about the EVOC project. If there are any, if I should have proceeded in a different fashion on implementing what I did. Oh. Okay, and the second was obviously the EVOC experience and suggestions. I think we have had enough discussion on it. So if there's anyone who'd like to say anything else. Oh. So, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Supreet.